Okay, so welcome for those joining. We're talking today about self-governance, inner authority, and it's related to the world stage. So I did mention that I was going to do a stream on two things. One was the Charlie Kirk scenario, and the other is the digital ID that people are concerned and talking about at the moment. So I've done two posts so far on the digital ID. I think it's actually a fair bit, which probably doesn't require too much more explanation and emphasis on. So we're going to talk about those two main current talking points, but we're going to talk about it in relation to the world stage and what that really means and why that is absolutely related to and kind of caused by the lack of inner authority and self-governance. So we'll cover that. And then, of course, before we get started, all of this is covered in detail in the Beginner's Guide to Natural Law course. That's where if you want to get to know more about self-governance and how it's broken down, why inner authority is so important, it's all there in the course. So first of all, the world stage, what is that? If we take a look at what happens in the world, what we're fed through the media, and then how it's spun through social media and just hearsay in general. So what people talk about, you have Chinese whispers running through everything. The original scenario is oftentimes never actually brought into the light of what people are receiving through the eyes and the ears. And that actually relates a lot to the phrase, hear no evil and see no evil. So we'll cover that shortly as well. But the world stage is simply this. It is a inverted mirror. So it can keep us away from ever getting to know our inner self, which is where inner authority and self-governance comes from. And when we have a lack of that, we will deal almost exclusively with being governed by an external force or energy, and also an external source of authority. So if we take the word authority, which I've broken down many times, and we relate it to the world stage, the first word in authority is author. So who's writing the story? What's the narrative? Story, of course, is law, L-O-R-E. That's where we get natural law from. So the world stage is simply what's been, what's happening in quote unquote the world, but then what is the world and what is that stage? That's most often the expression or the projection of what's going on within us. So where we lack self-governance, where we lack inner authority and inner story and that connection to natural law, we are going to be ruled and governed by authorities that are external to us, narratives that are external to us, and what else? We'll just be governed in general. So that's the control. So the authority and the governance, which is the control and the world stage. And it's a constant merry-go-round. So I said this many times. It was in my most recent post as well. The threats never end. So my quote unquote awakening, if you want to call it that, was around like the mid-90s. And I was in halfway through high school. I started to figure out a little bit of social engineering and social dynamics. I started to kind of figure out the schooling system and the educational system that I was in. And of course, it bred a lot of anger and distrust, and I was all alone and all that sort of stuff insofar as what I was seeing and how I was able to embody that and then express that into the world and make a positive difference. So I went into the fighting stage, and then that took me through into the tertiary education system, the world as we see it. Then 9/11 happened not long after that. And we'll talk a little bit about that as well and why that's relevant to the world stage and inner authority and why it's absolutely related to the Charlie Kirk story as well. And when we continue to just pour out, we're looking out there at this world stage, we are really being governed by that, because without our ability to self-regulate, to self-govern and have that authority, meaning what is our authoring? What's our story? Like, why are we expressing and how are we expressing? And there's so much in that's literally one of the classes in the course. So we'll just stick with the actual premise of it rather than explain that, but it's the story, the narrative, the law. That's what runs through everything, and that's what really determines the expression and the outcome. It's the law, the story, the authoring, and therefore the authority. And which way is it? Are we looking at the inner stage, or are we constantly fixated on the world stage and not really aware of what that is doing to us on an internal stage, if you want to call it that. So that's the setup for this. So when we talk about, let's say, 9/11, let's just talk about that quickly. So a lot of people at the time that it happened had no idea that that was a massive engineering feat of engineering, right? Like what you saw, which was smoke and mirrors, looked real, and it elicited a very, very, very real response from the people who were shown that, which you wouldn't have seen or heard about if it wasn't for CNN and the media systems that then filter their way through to each country. And then also, if you were at that time maybe aware of some kind of, quote unquote, conspiracy narratives, you wouldn't have been aware of that had it not been for underground YouTube channels and things like that. So again, not your narrative, not your story, not your stage. It's the world stage. And you had people at that time breaking down into tears of grief of people dying that they never knew existed. This is really important. We're going to expand on this a little. This is where the inner authority and the governance comes in. So, of course, as human beings, we have empathy and compassion. It's not nice to think or hear about or see, innocence dying. And this is the key, is because the question is innocence dying, or are we being shown the death of innocence on the world stage in a story format? And then we make a lot of mistakes, which I'll get into, but we anthropomorphize, we project, we think that that's us, we think that that's our freedom, we think that that's our innocence. That's why people start crying. So then if those people later find out that it was a hoax or it was engineered, or what if people never even died? Or it doesn't really matter what the story is. The fact is it was elicited from something that wasn't really real. Most people at this stage of the game know that that wasn't really real. Whether people died or not is not relevant to the conversation. The conversation is about the story, the lore, what's wrapped up, what actually presents and projects from the world stage, and really what's being projected from us, and what are we giving away in the process. So this is where this kind of lesson really starts to take place. So with 9/11, for example, if you were drawn into grief and you were drawn into tears for days or weeks, some people were, they just couldn't believe it. Then later found out that, it was, it was more what it was. Who knows what it really was at its core, but the fact is it was part of the world stage. How do you feel then? How do you feel when your true, genuine feelings of compassion and grief towards, someone or something was like, well, I think I got played a little. Like, how do you feel then, right? And similar, like in the last post I put, how do you feel when you're asked or told to fight back? Because in almost all of the cases, it elicits a drawing out of the energy. So there's a draining there that happens as a result. So let's just talk about story for a second. So imagine for a moment that I told you that Shane from down the road just died, and just leave it at that. Do you care? Does it elicit grief and sadness and tears and all that? Or are you kind of like, oh, okay. So then if I said something like, do you know Shane, who, runs the local milk bar? He actually got into a fight with Dave, who also lives down the road, and they had this scuffle because, he was doing this to his business and he was doing that to his family and et cetera, et cetera. And then something went awry, and then Shane got hit by a car, and it was really gruesome. You still might not care unless you know them, but you might be a bit kind of like, oh, that's not nice. That's not cool. But what's the difference? The first instance, you're kind of like, well, so what? Like, people die every day. Every moment of every day, somebody's leaving the earth plane and somebody's coming in. You kind of don't care, but you care a little more if there's a backstory. So that's the key. What's the story? What's the law? What's the narrative? And therefore, what's the authority within that narrative on that stage? Because you have no connection to them whatsoever. So we'll just cover this part now. It's actually not natural in any way, shape, or form to feel sadness or grief for someone you've never met, never heard of, didn't know anything about. Because otherwise, if we were that compassionate and that empathetic, we would not be alive. You wouldn't be able to function. You wouldn't be able to earn any money. You wouldn't get any tasks done. Your house would turn into a gigantic, disharmonic, unhealthy mess. You would not sustain relationships. You would not have yourself together if you were grieving all the time. You found out that a bird died, a cat died, somebody died down the road. This happened. Because that's just life. It happens all the time. And it's not in any way inhuman to not care. We don't care because it's not natural to care. It's bred into us as a control mechanism to care about someone or something we never knew about, is not part of our sphere, and et cetera, et cetera. So why is that important? Well, if we're paying attention to something that is outside of our sphere of influence, I don't know what that was. It paused it. So if we're, forget where I was then. So yeah, so if we're concerned, focused on, our attention is going to somewhere outside of our field of influence, we're going to have our energy drained. Why are we caring about what's happening in, I'll just name a few places: Israel, which isn't even a physical place; Gaza, America, if you're in Australia, the UK, if you're in America, et cetera, et cetera. Why? Why does it matter? The reality is, the fact is, it does not matter. That's the world stage, because we have a finite amount of energy. Well, I mean, you can make an argument for that, but just for the purpose of this example, a finite amount of energy, attention, creativity that you can pour into a day. Okay, so in the esoteric sense, yes, that's all unlimited. But for the purpose of pouring into a day, all of the attention that you're pouring into the world stage, you are therefore not, as a default mechanism or agreement, pouring into yourself, your cup. So that means your creative expression into the world, your family, your home, your immediate sphere of influence, which is also your family, your community, and your society. So that is suffering while you are paying, quote unquote, attention, which is your currency, to the world stage. So that's why it's highly unnatural. So anything within that sphere of influence, if something, quote unquote, tragic happens there, that's where it's natural to feel grief, sadness, anger. You might go into a suppressed state. That's natural. Outside of that, absolutely not natural. So this is where social engineering and the engineering of your energy and feelings takes place, because if somebody is real or fake assassinated, we'll get into why either is a distraction from inner authority and self-governance, but let's just say it's real, it's not. What people usually associate that to be is that, quote unquote, freedom. Like what was the narrative around that? What's the backstory? Okay, so the backstory involves something like freedom, standing up for things that are right or moral, things along those lines. I don't want to get too bogged down into details. So what happens is, if that gets assassinated, then our freedom is under threat. Our right to free speech is under threat. Our service of a higher good is under threat. Just whatever, fill in the blanks. That's what people start grieving about. But the reality is that it's not, because that's an engineered narrative, story, authority on the world stage. So therefore, our stage is like dilapidated. Our stage has no narrative. Our stage has no story. There is no author. There is no authority. Therefore, every single part of authority in the world is external, and it's governed onto us, controlled. That's why people feel so disempowered. The same way that works with, governance and authority kind of coalesce in that kind of example. But what we're really needing to drive home here is the fact that that is taking us away from us. So who we are, knowing who we are, getting to know ourselves in a deeper level. What is our true expression? What is our true story? What's the law, L-O-R-E, that is running through us, that we are co-writing and co-creating with life itself? I'm going to talk a little bit in a minute about, if I don't mention it, just remind me. I'm going to talk a little bit about where we have you're for something, against something, and in the middle is a balance point which takes you up and out of a particular narrative, and that's where it just will not get to you. So that's what I was talking about recently in my post about digital ID, where some people are going to be in that. They're going to be in that game that is created. They actually will not have a way out. So a lot of what I speak about, I keep reiterating that there's so many solutions to things, but for some people, it is a fact of life that they will not have a way out. They are embedded into that story because all of their authority and all of their governance is external. So they actually have no standing and nothing to say, no feet to stand on, and therefore they are going to be ruled and governed by that, no question. Then you're going to have people who are under quote unquote threat of that because they're still kind of mixed up in that game, but they'll have the ability because of their awareness, education, they're beginning to get a standing, they're beginning to kind of create their own law and narrative. So therefore, less external governance, less external authority, more inner governance, more inner authority, and more of an inner stage, not so much of the world stage. They might struggle a bit. They might have a little bit of trepidation, a bit of fear, a few setbacks, lots of challenges, but they'll get through it and have created something different on the other side, where that game that was binding these ones over here really isn't affecting them, but it did take something from it. It took some energy. But there's people who are just not even in that game or on that stage at all. They're not a main character. They're not a supporting character. They're not an extra. They're not in the production crew. They're not in the kitchen making meals for the extras or the production crew or the actors. They're not on that stage at all. So even the question of a digital ID isn't even a question. It's just they're not in that game. So the same happens when you stop paying attention so much to the world stage and start putting more of your attention to the inner stage. Because that is, hey, I got to qualify this, that is available to everybody. However, because of the ability or the, let's say the abilities of perception of a certain number of people, they actually don't have that ability open to them. There are another subsection of people, like I gave in that example before, that kind of could go either way. And there are other people who are fully embodied into that ability to perceive, and therefore that option or that internal narrative. So that's where we're starting to self-govern. The less we can self-govern, the more we, as a default mechanism, like I said, will be governed from an external source. But it's a bit deeper than that, because it's almost like the harder we rage against stuff, the more we think that we all as a collective have to non-comply, stand up, fight for our rights, fight this, fight back, all that kind of stuff. That, believe it or not, actually begs for more governance, because what it's doing, it's kind of saying don't. It's like that, it's like a double negative affirmation kind of thing. Like, don't not let me not get punched in the face today. It's like, that's what, why is that even in your narrative at all? And then you're putting a double negative in it, you're going to bring something on you that you're not really going to like. Plus, it shouldn't be in the first place. So all of that actually begs for more governance, begs for more control, begs for more authority, which is why you see the world going the way it is, because really it's just a stage. It's an expression or a projection of what's inside of us. And so it's just literally mirroring or mimicking where we're at. This is where we're at. We lack self-governance and inner authority. So therefore, there is more and more and more external authority and external governance. However, it's not across the board. So what I was saying in the most recent post as well, the whole spiritual new age thing of we're all one, we're definitely not all one. There are certain people in life that will absolutely be governed and controlled for their entire life. They're part of the collective, and the collective is part of the world stage, or maybe more accurately, the world stage is the projection of the collective. So when you are on the path to individuation, which is more of the soul journey, it's more of that inner world. So you start projecting and expressing into a different outer world, which means you and Bob or Davo or Shano over here literally occupy completely different worlds that could share some crossover similarities, but what governs and controls this has no effect on that whatsoever. So the example that I gave in the post is that my role currently is of a teaching capacity. So I make a living from teaching principles of natural law, which then extend into health and freedoms and et cetera, et cetera. What I currently do is not governed by an individual, a man, a woman, or a person, an entity, a governing body, a corporate conglomerate of any kind, a trust, an entity, whatever. Nothing of that nature controls or governs what I do. The reason for that is because I sacrificed a lot. Well, it seemed like sacrifice early on, like I couldn't make as much money, or I didn't have as many opportunities. There was no helping hand. There were no handouts. There was nothing to help me. I had to do it all for myself. So early on, it's a bit more of hard work. It means, being a bit of an outcast. It means having awkward conversations or not even relating with people. And a lot of people have related to that over the last 5 years. It's been like that for me since I was a kid. So what it does though, it allows you to go through so many hero's journeys that you start to realize you're actually getting to know who you are outside of the collective mind virus, the collective narrative, the collective world stage. And you start going, oh, so those things that affect them, they don't affect me. You can't necessarily explain it at the time, but you start to see that play out over and over and over. And then you meet other people who you might have a conversation with them about things that are happening to you. And they're like, what are you talking about? And you go, oh, wait, so these things that the collective is talking about and all of these conversations that keep going around, I'm not affected by that. But then these people over here are even affected by what I'm talking about. So you start to notice those patterns as well. What it really boils down to is that we're starting to move into that path of individuation where we're not governed by that external narrative, external sources, stories, laws. We're starting to be governed internally and have that inner authority because we have that story. We're actually playing out more of our reason to be here, which you must separate from the collective in order to be able to even start to fathom, hear, see, feel, and then to be able to express. So that path of individuation does require some kind of sacrifice or some kind of loss of some kind or whatever, but it's only related to quote unquote the matrix, which is you're not really letting anything of any value go. Anyway, you're letting go of a perceived value, a false value, an inverted mirror image value, and starting to tap into the real thing where that really comes from. And that's why you will not be somebody who has to be bothered by digital ID or fake shootings or anything of that nature. It just literally does not enter into your sphere. So hopefully that summarizes, at least fairly effectively, inner authority, self-governance, and the world stage. Just going back to the narrative and the story. So when I gave the example of just mentioning somebody died the other day and you're kind of like, who cares? That's the natural reaction. The deeper the story and the more that story can carry over, and it's very similar, or it feels close to home. It feels like your story. One of the biggest mistakes I see people making, and I've seen it across the board since, I have videos. I should post some videos actually of what I used to make from 2008 and that onwards, where no one ever watched those videos, but speaking about the narratives and speaking about corruption and speaking about what the government really is and speaking about health and alternative health. And that really didn't give me much traction. But what I've noticed over the years is that everybody, even before Facebook and Instagram were a thing, everybody thought that if they were speaking out, they were under threat. And this is what I mean. The threats, if you're in that world, if you're part of the world stage, the threats never end. There's always another war, financial threat. There's another germ threat. And there's always threats to your health. Oh, the chemtrails, there's more chemicals, there's forever chemicals. None of that's actually real. When you can't see it when you're in the world stage. So that sounds like nonsense gobbledygook. But talk to anybody who's at least on the path of soul individuation, and they'll be like, yeah, I don't think that any of those things are real either. And it's not just that I don't think that, I know that because that's not in my reality. That's not in my expression, because that is coming from the inside, not from the outside, which is a huge distinction to make. It's literally night and day, two different things. So when people are able to start separating from that, they don't have to worry. There's no threats anymore. Not that there's none, there's just less. So the more you go into into soul individuation, the less threats there are. But that's when we start to find the real threats. I'll get back to what I was saying in a second, but that's when we start to find the real threats, which is us. It's our internal programs, our belief systems, our inherited quote unquote traumas, our ancestral baggage. So these are the things we really want to start exercising: non-consent, non-compliance, rewriting the story, because those are actually governing us, not what's outside of us. It's just that we're unaware of that. We let that rule us. That becomes a story, and then that's projected onto the world. And that's where we start getting caught up in the world stage. So somebody gets quote unquote assassinated, and then that's why we feel under threat. That's why we feel sad or grief. And so what does that mean? It means it's not real. None of that's real. That's why people say that this is a simulation, a hologram, a fill in the blank of words there. It's because it's not actually real. So it feels real. The feelings are real. The tears are real. The anger or frustration is real. And if you take that out on something, the physical consequences of that are real, but it was based on something that was not real because it was not you. You were tricked. It was an illusion, a mirror image, an inversion, and it was taken. Or more to the point, you gave it away. And look, that's happened to all of us. No one's immune to that, quote unquote, especially as we grow into ourselves and into the world. But as we do that and start becoming adults, which means taking responsibility, having inner authority, having inner governance, and not paying attention to the world stage, actually starting to build our own stage, that's when we can start actually making leaps and bounds into the world itself because of what we're doing in that inner world. And that's where we don't have things like forever chemicals. We don't really care that the skies are sprayed as much as they are, because there are actual solutions to that, and we can live that. We can live those solutions. So when you're talking to people who are on the world stage or in the world stage, and they're like, but why aren't we fighting it? Why aren't we kicking in doors? And why aren't we? It's like, because that's all your creation. You don't understand that yet. So they don't understand what you're talking about when you're like, there are solutions to that, but I can't give them to you because you wouldn't be able to. It's like giving somebody a magical, I don't know, instrument or something, and you give it to them and you say, look, you just have to play that, and then the sound it makes will heal your body and fix your relationships and whatever else. And they can't, they don't even know where to start with it. They can't play it. It's a very similar analogy to explaining to people that these things in the world do not affect you. So if you're on path to soul individuation, but you are affected fully by what's happening inside, and that's a much tougher journey. Like, I'm not sure that there's many people out there who would tell you that that's an easier journey than the world stage. I actually think it's harder, but it's definitely more fruitful because it's more real, and therefore you're just getting closer to what you're meant to be doing, and therefore all of that other stuff doesn't matter. So anyway, getting back to what I was saying, so many people I've met along the way, everybody thinks that ASIO or the government or the feds, CIA, FBI, like, MI6 or whatever, oh, they're tapping my computer, they're listening to everything I'm saying. It's like, just because you say out loud the government's corrupt, or people shouldn't get vaccinated, or, Israel's like whatever, no one cares. No one cares. No one's coming after you. No one cares. Literally. It's this self-aggrandizement thing where we find some kind of value or some kind of purpose and meaning in like having something to say about something that we see as corrupt. And that's what gives us our standing. But that's not a real standing. That's not a standing that's real between you and your creator. Like, where are you in the standing of hierarchy? Again, that's all in the course if you don't understand what I'm talking about. So when we don't have that, we try to build a false structure of standing that we can have something to stand on. So we have like, this is me, this is who I am, this is what I do. But that then is your identity. That's what I was talking about in the first digital ID post. All of your identification is digital already. And second to that, most people's identity, like their identity, like I'm a this guy, I'm a that guy, I'm this expert, I'm a master, whatever. It's like, God didn't give you that title. That's not your creation. That's not the creator's law. That's not God's law and story working through you. That's your fictional thing that you're projecting as an avatar into the world. So your identity is digital. You see, read people's bios on social media. It's this self-flagellating thing of it's not the real story. Now, there's reason and purpose for it, absolutely. Otherwise, like, how do I know that you're a plumber or you have expertise in a certain area? Like, I want to know that, so I know, who I can speak to if it's relevant or whatever. But that's not who you are. So it's important because it's important when we are able to establish a separation between us and the thing. But when we identify and we create joinder with that, well, guess what? Your identity is digital. So don't complain about it. You already are it. You created it. You gave it. Like, that's your creation. It's not. And so that's why you feel that there's external authority and external governance. Not you as in the person listening, just in general. That's the narrative that is going around everywhere, yet again, and none of it's real. So hopefully that makes some sense, because everybody along the way thinks that. Then you hear stories, because I did a podcast the other day with somebody who said that there's the story of some lady that got arrested. Police came to her house and arrested her because she posted something on Facebook. So that's Can that be a reality for someone? Yes. So, okay, great. Now, what's part of natural law? What's one of the main lessons? Questions. So, how did that come about? Why is that? Because I write stuff every day on Facebook that's way more, like, cuts way deeper into the quote unquote beast or the matrix than that. I've never had a phone call. I've never had a knock on the door. No one cares. Sometimes my page will get promoted. So why are they getting arrested? So first thing, because we're now going to start getting into these 3 steps of the world stage. The first thing is, what's the story? So how did that come about? Assuming it's real, because most of the time it's not. Assuming that it is real, what have they done to end up there in the first place? I just replied to somebody on Facebook or something earlier today. They said, because I said after my last post, I said PS, because this was about, again, giving your power away and digital ID and things. I said, PS, do you remember when everybody was rounded up into camps and force vaccinated? I said, yeah, me neither, because that was one of the dominant narratives from 2019 to 2023. People were like, we've got to stop this happening because we're going to get herded into concentration camps, or whatever word you want to use for that, and then force vaccinated. And the whole time I'm like, can you please stop listening to these large account influencer type people who are just trying to raise your eyebrows, raise clout, raise funds, raise whatever, just grifting, lying. Or some of them aren't even lying. They probably genuinely believe that. That's why they shouldn't be saying stuff. And the whole time I'm like, guys, it's never going to happen. 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 And of course it didn't happen. That doesn't mean I know everything. That just means, like, that's a basic fundamental principle of law, is that can't happen. So somebody then went and said on the social media, which I think was Facebook, she said, but there are places where people are put into things and held down and vaccinated or whatever against their will. And I'm like, yeah, but that is a thing. That might be a thing in, say, some kind of African communities. That might be a thing in mental health wards. But I'm like, why are you projecting into something that's not this is not you? You can help that, but only to the degree that you can individuate. Nobody can help the collective or the world stage if they're in that play, because what's being scripted, the authority is never, ever them. It is always externalized. The authority, the governance, the world stage, they're in it. They're on it. They're being run by it. They cannot affect it. The only way to affect that, if indeed it is the right and moral thing to do, is to begin the path of individuation. Only then can you actually elicit a positive influence into that world stage. And most of the time, that's definitely not your purpose once you're on that path of individuation, but it may happen as a byproduct of a healthy natural law based on you being absolutely devoted to your individuation, getting to know who you are and serving your creator. So you have a real, true, not inverted mirror image, real, true standing in this world, in life, under God. That's when you can have an effect on the quote unquote world stage and the collective in the we are all one narrative, which is not a true narrative. So that's where true cause and effect can actually take place. Because without that, it's all smoke and mirrors. It's my identity. It's like, I'm a this expert. I have 30 million followers and I raise funds for children, and I do, and nothing's happening of any virtue, morality, and whatever. And all it's doing is creating more external control structures, more external authorities, because it's wrapping that narrative up in its own tragedy, essentially. So yeah, people think that they're like, oh, I can't post on Facebook because so that's when Charlie Kirk, quote unquote, assassination, quote unquote, happens. People think that freedom is under threat. The Second Amendment, or whatever it is in America, I should start learning that, whatever the free speech is first, I think it is, and all that is under threat, but it's not. Because even if that was a real story, somebody get arrested, like, who knows what they are? Let's just rattle off a few things just for fun. They could be a career criminal. They could be being arrested for something totally unrelated to that, but it happens to be just pinned on something to do with Facebook or something like that. They could have been running a drug or child trafficking ring from their Facebook account. That's why they got raided. Like the amount of truth and nonsense they get, because that's just never, ever, 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 ever going to be a reality for somebody who is just generally posting stuff on social media. Okay, but we make this mistake where we fall into more of this self-important stuff, which is not real importance. It's not God's narrative or standing, your true self. It's this fake stuff. So then we go, oh, like I'm under watch by ASIO, so like that gives me importance. It's all fake. None of it's real. They don't care about you at all. So it's all based in the narrative, the law, what's running through it. So therefore, then what's the cause and effect? They could also be an MK Ultra clone, if you want to go a bit further out there. Designed to be in that position to be able to make a story out of it that will then affect and draw people who are true souls out of their true soul journey in life and into the world stage, into a fake narrative, into external authority, into external governance. Forgetting who they are, falling into fear, losing faith, losing belief in themselves, getting off track, and therefore, quote unquote, evil, which I keep saying is just deception, wins. Why? Because this one did not just decide, you know what, it's on the world stage. Who cares? That's not me. That's not my narrative or whatever. I'm going to focus on what I can do. And that's where people get stuck, because they go, okay, for a moment, I can intellectualize that. But wait, what does that mean? How do I do that? How do I write a story? How do I author? How do I learn to speak with more authority for myself, for my family, for my community and my society? Okay, I don't know how to do that. So therefore, immediate reversion back, because that puts you into a child state, like a 5-year-old with no standing in the real sense. So now I have my fake standing by being able to, give social commentary on something that's happening on the world stage, because that gives me likes. That gives me validation. People will subscribe to me if I do that. And all of it's not real. So again, there's nothing really like, I don't have an issue with that. I'm just giving these streams because I'm like, if people actually would like to know how not to be affected by external governance, external authority, that's how. That's also how, as a default mechanism and agreement, you start not only dealing less with agents like police, council, banks, tax officers, whatever, but you actually barely even realize that they're in the same world that you're in because of what you're doing. And it's always supported. That's the thing, is once you start actually getting on track, on purpose, getting to know yourself, operating with the natural laws, you find that it's all there for you. It actually all supports you. Even the quote unquote system supports you when you realize it's set up for you, not against you. It's just that we lose our way. We're easily tricked with orphan mind viruses. And that's when it like has its binds in us. And that's where we get loosed. And that's where we lose money. That's where we get fined and all the other negative things that people experience in the world. And like this lady was saying, they're like, yeah, the people are force vaccinated and whatever. And I said, yeah, but that's 100% true for a certain tiny energy, if you want to call it that, in the world. But it's 100% not true for everybody else. So why are you focusing on that? Because you'll never help that if you're focusing on it like that. So anyway, I just want to speed this up a bit. So this is obviously in place of the email that I would send out. If you're watching this on social media, these don't save on social media, but if you're on my mailing list, and if you're not on my mailing list, you go to thehumblekingdom.com, click free resources, and you'll get a couple of free classes that I've done there, just casual ones like this, and this will be sent out on that list as well. So it's free to watch. And then, obviously all of this is just speaking about it casually. We break it down into our actual structured lessons in the course. So if this is resonating with you and you want to know more about how to do this for yourself, it's in the Beginner's Guide to Natural Law. So the 3 stages here is that there's always more, but there's just 3 distinct ones which I'm going to touch on now. So one is that the event is a controlled op where the event itself is faked or staged, and no one dies. So we're sacrificing the image of something. So no human being died. The image of them died, which also means the image of, like I said before, innocence, purity, sanctity, freedom, truth, or whatever. That's what's quote unquote assassinated, or so we call that the event. And the event itself is controlled. It's a fake staged op. Okay. There's a second likely scenario that the event is a controlled op, and that's where a real event takes place, but it's still orchestrated and controlled. So rather than a ritual sacrifice of an ideal or an idea, there is a ritual sacrifice of a human being. But because under natural law that never actually happens, now you actually have to start asking why. So that example I gave earlier about Davo that carked it, you're like, who cares? So what's the law? What's the narrative behind it? So that's when you can start getting into, okay, what group are they a part of that does things like ritual sacrifices? And if they were actually taken, it's not part of your reality at all. That kind of thing never, ever, ever happens to people who are not part of that world. Second, it could just be that it's made to look like that's happened, in which case it's still a controlled op. And what's happening there is that, again, if you want to go into more far out examples, what if they weren't even a real person? Like the amount of, I won't get too deep into this, but it's good to allow the mind to just expand further into possibilities that you might not have already had, whether it's real, whether it's not. It's just the fact that there are possibilities that don't bind you, because the more possibilities there are out there, the more you're like, you know what? We will probably never know. And that's the point. That should make you go, okay, we'll probably never know. So who cares? So what do I care about? I care about me, my standing, my connection to God, my creation, my family, my community, my society. That's the only sphere of influence that we actually have. And we lose it when we outsource to and we project into the world stage, right? So then the third is that the event is a non-controlled op where a genuine casualty occurs. And although I've been adamant that like that doesn't happen, I'm just talking insofar as you as an individual listening to this lesson, who's even drawn to my content, is not in the sphere of influence, the world stage, the narrative, where somebody will be like imprisoned in some way, force vaccinated, and there's nothing you can do about it. That's not a reality for somebody who would even be drawn to, let alone is listening to or watching my content. Okay, can that happen to some people in the world? Yeah, but you have nothing to do with that, so don't worry about it. Again, the only way you would ever be able to have any positive influence on that whatsoever is if you are individuating from it. So there are very, very, very few times in life where a third, I call it a type 3 event would occur, where a genuine non-controlled casualty occurs. But then you would still have to ask the question under natural law, why? What's the law? What's the story? There would usually be, this is just my opinion, but I would say there would always be some kind of karmic relative backstory to that happening, tied to the event and tied to the other parties that were involved in it. I've never seen evidence to the contrary for that being the case, but I'm happy to be wrong. I don't know everything, obviously. But what this way of being able to see things, the type 1, type 2, and type 3 events, it allows you to go, none of those affect me. None of those are my creation. None of those I'm authoring. None of those are in inner authority. It's all external, and I'm being governed externally, and I don't like it, and I don't have to have that. So when a narrative or a story is created, that creates a game. And I actually came across Summer, she started playing us an audiobook recently, and I forget what it's called, but I forget what it's called, but they're talking about pendulums. And it's just a different way of describing what I've been describing for a long time. I really like it. I liked the content. I haven't gone through all of it, but when I'm launching a new thing coming soon, I won't say too much about it, I will be breaking down things of that nature that other people have written or created or whatever as well, and how it relates to natural law and how you can really apply it in a tangible sense in your day-to-day life. But what happens is when an offer, because I say everything's an offer, so that creates a narrative. There's an authoring in there, so there's an authority in there, and it creates a game. Now, under natural law, what you create, you own. So anything within that game is not of your creation. You're essentially being part of it. Now, that's not a bad thing at all. You can have great experiences, accrue great wealth, both in a physical and in a sense, by being part of a game. But the trick is learning how to master the game. So rather than just being like an extra where you're just being flicked around everywhere willy-nilly, you don't even get paid or get paid your worth or anything like that, you start to master that game where you're playing more of an active role in it. But then what happens is you start to realize, okay, rather than just being part of this game, which is not my creation, I can start creating games of my own. But you first have to learn how games work before you can do that. You have to learn how agreements are formed. So you have the offer, you have acceptance or non-acceptance, which is usually involved in negotiation. Then you have an outcome, which is an agreement or contract, and consideration is given to an agreement to create a contract. And once you understand how the games work and how the energy flows, and you start to level the playing field, is how we call it in our course, then you can, at that point, once you start to level the playing field, and what's an example of that? Learning, I call it verbal jiu-jitsu. How do you communicate with somebody who is an agent in commerce? Before that, using discernment, which is judgment, which is part of the course, how do you use and exercise your discernment and judgment to be able to figure out what's going on, what's real and what's not real? So those examples I was giving before about real standing versus like projected, mirror image, inverted, holographic, simulated stuff, which isn't real but feels real but isn't. It's not the real thing, like crying over somebody who never died, who you never knew. And the backstory, the law that's making you cry is controlled. It's orchestrated, it's fake, it's not real. So that's how we're learning to discern real from not real. Again, what's real? Me. I'm real. My reflection in the mirror or my image on this screen, not me, not real. Very, very important distinction to make. Real, not real. Real, not real. So real, but I see a photo of myself on an ID or on a screen or a reflection in a mirror, not real. Okay, very, very basic rules of law that is very, very important to learn, part of discernment. So therefore also law, narrative, what's real, what's not real. Offer, okay, do I even need to respond to that offer? If so, how, why? What's the best way to do that to level the playing field? If somebody gives me an offer that's vexatious, nefarious, trying to take from me, and I've discerned, I'm using my verbal jiu-jitsu skills to be able to level the playing field, what happens is if they are giving me anything that is not in my best interest, it works against them. Then they pay me. Or they pay you, whatever the case is. So somebody that did my notices course who lives locally, I think I posted this as well. I ran a course on notices where I only ran a very small group of people through it because I wanted to keep it tight, people who just really wanted to value what they were doing, and I could make sure that we could give everybody the right amount of tuition in that. One guy got he maintained a really high worth contract that he wasn't going to maintain otherwise. Somebody else kept a predator off their back. One guy dealt with a real estate agent, and they're notoriously bad to deal with in the rental system. He got money out of him and a decent payment too. He actually bought me a cigar as a thank you for that. And somebody else actually in the course realized that there was so much energy they were pouring into things that were just not worth. So they learned to pick their battles, and that was worth more than the price they paid for the course. So it's like when you can learn these kinds of skills, these are tangible, real world skills that you don't learn by just learning things like the game of life and how to play it, or the Tao Te Ching or something like that. Like those are great works. They mean a lot, but like where the rubber meets the road, they just don't do anything. If you haven't learned real world skills, you're going to have this head full of spiritual knowledge or whatever that you cannot apply into the world and therefore affect real change and influence. Just like how people think they have to think of Lamborghinis and put them on their vision board and write, I drive a Lamborghini every day on their mirror. They're not going to end up in a Lamborghini. They might get run over by one instead, That's a bad example, but you know what I mean? It's not how things work in the real world. So anyway, I kind of forgot what I was talking about there, but the whole point of that was that if you don't have these skills, you got to knuckle down to learn. I really honestly believe that, especially as a man, it's a really, really key skill in masculinity to be able to use a pen wisely, to be able to use your words wisely, to know how to handle offers like, that's what I was talking about. So within a game, once you learn how to level the playing field with your words, with your written word, with your actions, with being able to discern what to put your energy into and what not to put your energy into, now you're leveling it out. Now you can actually start creating games of your own. Which that's where the world stage is not your stage. You're actually starting to build your own stage. So somebody gets assassinated, who cares? There's supposed to be like another erosion of your quote unquote rights. Who cares? They're not your rights. It's not where rights come from. So this is where we're starting to get much more into the realms of natural law, inner authority, inner governance, and building your own stage. So there was more to this. I don't think I need to keep giving many more examples. Actually, I'll give one example here. I wrote this down. I'll read it out because I think it's because even though I'm obviously sharing this in a capacity of having, learnt and kind of gotten out of some of the traps and whatever, it's not like I was immune to them. It's not like I'm better than other people. I have learned a lot through experience, and it's valuable. I know it's valuable. That's why I share it. So when the floods happened here in the Northern Rivers in 2022, I fell into some of the game as well. And the game was a type 2 event. So going back to the events, type 1 event in the world is it's orchestrated, and something the image of is sacrifice. So nothing real occurs. It's just all done with smoke and mirrors. Type 2 is when it is orchestrated. So the floods were orchestrated through weather engineering. And like I kept saying, I think that people gave too much of their energy into the big rallies that were happening just prior to that, which was used against the people. And that was a type 2 event because tangible stuff happened where homes were flooded out, people died, and things like that. So my position at the time was explaining how it happened on several levels, because people were just thinking it was, like I was, I don't even know how to describe it. I just felt the need to help people understand that there was more levels to it. Like it was just amplifying a natural event, as in nature, because of the way that we are and how a lot of people are treating the land around here and messing with things they shouldn't mess with, and things like that. Like nature self-regulates, so therefore nature will flush itself out. Like the Tool song Anima, where it's like Mother Nature's going to come and flush it all away. And they say no, I won't go into the song, but it's really good. I'll break that down in one of my future streams, just breaking down songs. But I kind of felt the need to explain that and how it was amplifying a natural event. It would happen anyway based on the natural cycles of the realm, but it was made a lot worse because of the geoengineering and the not riots, the rallies that people went to that amplified that, and et cetera, and people leaving where they were and should be doing the real work there to go somewhere else to chase ghosts and get involved in smoke and mirrors and give their power away instead of anchoring it where they are, which would have prevented a lot of the damage, I believe. So I was just explaining that, how it works on several levels. Nature is mimicking us. And then I wrote here, but the only real work that got done was by those who stepped into who they really were and lent a hand to those who needed it. And that's who we really are at a base level too. Like most of us who have the ability to have individuation in this lifetime are kind, loving, compassionate, and et cetera. So we're not psychopaths. We're not sociopaths. We're not, what's the word for it? It's a narcissist type of narcissist. It doesn't really matter. You get what I'm talking about. We're not that. Like we have our things because of how we are programmed, we grow up, but we're still perfect in that way. We still have divinity. We're just a bit separated because we kind of forget who we are. We still fall into our patterns and things like that. But at the end of the day, the chips fall. We're like, even if our enemy, like old mate down the road, who I hate because he leaves his bins out too long on a Tuesday and I just don't like it. And like, if there's a flood, I'm still going to go help that guy and he would still help me, because underneath all of that, we still have our divinity. And that's what comes out in situations like that. So I said, the only real work that got done was by those who stepped into who they really were and lent a hand to those who needed it. Not a fundraising hand, which happened a lot. Not a giving someone a fridge hand, which happened a lot. Not a photo or video of helping hand, which I literally saw people turn up. I didn't say anything about it at the time because it wasn't the time to like shame people. It was time to help people. And but I saw people who are influencers turn up, put something in a wheelbarrow, give about 5 minutes of help, and then get back in the car and drive off. And I'm like, and these people were getting a lot of applause from like the public for helping. A true one-to-one extension of your hand to another that no one else ever knew of. And that's when you know it's real and it's true. Like people might know of it and that's okay, but also it's okay and probably better if nobody knows about it. That's the true essence of something that's real and tangible, has morals, value, purpose, meaning, reason, and all the rest of it. That's real gold. And so where I went wrong was that part of my role was like I was trying to educate people on things like why it happened and what we can do about it and how to prevent it and purify your waters and all that, which still has value. But what I can still, still be proud about is that I also did the second part where I spent a lot of hours trekking and helping and doing things where I didn't have a phone or anything to take photos of it. I didn't post about it. I didn't want anything for it. I wasn't trying to give people, I wasn't trying to raise money for it. I wasn't trying to do anything other than just purely help. So I did that as well. But I also did the part where I was trying to like educate in that, which had its place, but that's not real value. The real value is in just helping just to help and nothing else. But I did a stream about this when people went through the hurricanes in the States, and I was like, you just be real careful when these things happen because a lot of insidious stuff starts creeping in as a result. And there was a lot of that happened here more than you would like to know, but that did happen. So I guess I'll end there because that's going to hopefully give you a good idea of inner authority versus external authority, inner governance versus external governance. Remember, the less you have of the former, you will have more of the latter. That's just how it works. You can't have a lot of external governance and authority going on if you have it on the inside. It just doesn't happen. And then the world stage, just realizing what the world stage is, what your role is and is not based on or relative to the world stage, which is all your choice. That's what my lessons all boil down to is that it comes down to choice. And believe it or not, if you're invested in the whole world stage thing, that's your choice. You're choosing that. And like I said before, most people are choosing it because they just don't have anything else to fall back on, which means they don't have a standing. And that's okay. Like, we don't come into this world, in the modern world, in the way it's, the way it works and the way we're brought up, most of us, we don't have a standing. So we have to remember it, rebuild it. And that's kind of why we're here. But that's the path of individuation, which is it's not for everybody, but for those for whom that is a part of, it's just, I guess once you start to realize that you're starting to feel more and more like, oh, I don't know, I kind of think that might be true. Like, the more you'll get a few nudges, then a few taps, and then maybe a few hits until you start to go, all right, okay, it's time, I have to do this. That's life kind of guiding you, because like I said, there's a lot of people in this world for whom that is not a thing. They would not even get through the start of this stream. The whole stream to them would be just utter nonsense. But for those of us that are like, that know that this is our path and there's truth in this, it's like, that's at some point you will naturally just need to embark on that journey, because it's what we're really here for. And if you would like to make that a little easier, and based on some lessons and experiences that have real and tangible results that can be proven and replicated and all the rest of it, that's what the Beginner's Guide to Natural Law is for. It's currently got the mainstream 23 modules and like 1 or 2 extras where there's 11 Q&As, and then we are about to produce the actual main part of the course, which is the classroom lecture sessions, and there's quite a bunch of those going in. So once that's done, it's going to be a complete course. You can still get in at a entry point that is less than what it will be once it's completed. And if you get in before it's completed, you get all updates, revisions, and additions to the course at no charge throughout the life. It's like when you buy, a piece of software and you buy it at like version 3. It doesn't matter if the price goes up. If you have the software, you have the program, all the updates are included. You don't pay extra for when it's updated, improved, and added to. So that's what we did with the course. So if you want to learn about governance, authority, games, authoring, it's all in there, and it's a good place to start. So thank you very much for tuning in. And if you're on the stream, just remember it's not saved to Instagram or anything. It goes on to, it's free. It's still free to watch. It's just that I upload this to my account, and then you get the link to watch it. So just get on the mailing list, thehumblekingdom.com, click on free resources. You'll get a couple of free things like this, just me talking, giving a casual lesson. And this one will also be included as well, and that'll be up in a couple of days. Thanks for joining.